Our reading this morning is Affirmation by Assata Shakur. I believe in living. I believe in the spectrum of beta, days, and gamma people. I believe in sunshine, in windmills and waterfalls, tricycles, and rocking chairs. And I believe that seeds grow into sprouts, and sprouts grow into trees. I believe in the magic of the hands and in the wisdom of the eyes. I believe in rain and tears and in the blood of infinity. I believe in life, and I have seen the death parade march through the torso of the earth, sculpting mud bodies in its path. I have seen the destruction of the daylight and seen bloodthirsty maggots prayed to and saluted. I have seen the kind become the blind and the blind become the bind in one easy lesson. I have walked on cut glass. I have eaten crow and blunder bread and breathed the stench of indifference. I have been locked by the lawless, handcuffed by the haters, gagged by the greedy, and if I know anything at all, it's that a wall is just a wall and nothing more at all. It can be broken down. I believe in living. I believe in birth. I believe in the sweat of love and in the fire of truth. And I believe that a lost ship, steered by tired, seasick sailors, can still be guided home to port.
Thank you, Holly, for reading those words by the activist and freedom fighter and also the poet, Assata Shakur. I'm Reverend Elizabeth Nguyen. I use she and her, and I'm a Unitarian Universalist community minister and also a UU living in Malden and often worshiping here with you all. I'm a migrant justice organizer for Community Justice Exchange, and glad to be back with you all in worship today. This past year, we did not harvest anything. We moved into a new home here in Malden about a year ago, and it has a blessedly incredibly large backyard for this part of the state, and it had not been touched for going on maybe 5 years. So it was a cross between jungle, meadow, abandoned lot, mostly invasive species. And I am not a huge gardener, but over the years, someone in our household had usually planted something. Tomato seedlings in red solo cups when we had no backyard, hot peppers in pots when we did. And last year, a farmer friend dropped off a few seedlings, tomatillos, peppers, herbs. We put them in pots on our picnic table, and none of them made it past the drought and record-setting heat and the chaos of our first few months in a new house. So this fall, we built 2 raised beds in the meadow, jungle, abandoned lot of our backyard, even though there was no time to plant before the frost. And we actually built them twice, not leveling the ground exactly right the first time around. And they are there in our backyard, an act of faith that someday we will get it together to prepare the ground, to be sowers of seeds, to plant. Faith in a harvest that I don't know if it will come this summer or this fall, but hopefully, maybe one day. This fall in Massachusetts, and probably many of you were part of this or following along closely, we passed a law allowing everyone, inclusive of any immigration status in this country, to have a driver's license. And then, after racist groups organized to try to prevent that law from being implemented, we successfully defended that law on the ballot. And so, this July, many people will, for the first time in Massachusetts, be able to, with a license, drive to work, pick up their kids, go to a doctor's appointment. And one of the groups that is the reason that we won licenses for all in this state after fighting for more than 20 years is called cosecha, the Spanish word for harvest. The first time this law was introduced to the legislature in Massachusetts, it was 2003. A fight for licenses that many people, and I'll be honest, including myself, doubted that we would ever win. Movimiento Cosecha has a number of principles that ground their organizing and are part of this huge life-changing win. And I want to share a few of those principles with you. Principles that are good for planting seeds in your backyard, for passing laws, and for finding space to resist against the fascism and injustice of our times. One of those principles: the soil of our harvest is respect and reciprocity. The ground on which this movement stands is in the relationships of its participants. Another principle: our seeds come from the tree of sacrifice. We honor the hard work of all the people who bring their gifts to the movement. We believe that the people's work in cosecha is for the collective well-being of everyone, not for personal gain or individual interests. Another principle: one harvest, many fruits. There are thousands of ways to be part of strategy. We encourage daily autonomy and creativity in how to implement the movement based on people's conditions. At the same time, our movement unity depends on all of us working together. The principles are the music score of our orchestra, and the instruments are the creativity of our activists. And the last principle I'll share: we are one of many harvests. We know the injustices of our community cannot be undone with just one movement. We know that the systems of domination require multiple cycles of movements working for many decades to bring reciprocity and balance. Cosecha was founded in 2015 based on a deep reflection on what has worked and not worked in nonviolent movements for justice across the world, from student movements against dictatorships to the Indian independence movement. Folks studied how mass non-cooperation in the form of boycotts, strikes, work slowdowns could transform material realities, and studied how providing people with places to live and food to eat made it possible for them to take risks for justice. I am no political strategist, but in my experience, cosecha changed the game on the ground in Massachusetts around licenses. While immigrant groups inside of the State House were fighting, cosecha was in the streets, mobilizing people, bringing together people at churches statewide, bringing folks to the State House to sit in and camp out and hunger strike. There was pressure within the legislative process and outside of it. I remember when cosecha first started in Massachusetts. We were very intentional about organizing undocumented immigrants as their base. So my role was very clearly and gladly a supportive and peripheral one. Our house was a place where organizers stayed, and our kitchen was one where we often were cooking huge amounts of food for events and gatherings. I remember early fundraising parties and events where organizers shared some of those principles that I shared this morning. The soil of our harvest is respect and reciprocity. Our seeds come from the tree of sacrifice. One harvest, many fruits. and there will be many, many harvests as we work toward justice. I try to get my head around what it means to fight for one law for 20 years, and to fight for one law that is not perfect and not by any means what we need in the long term. And it is a law that will change lives, a law that means that people will drive with less fear. It means that if someone gets pulled over and ends up in court, they have a much less likely chance of risking contact with ICE or being deported just because they drove somewhere. On election day, when we defended the law on the ballot, my father-in-law was visiting us, and he told the story of how many years ago, when he did not have a license and he did not have papers, how he moved mountains to be able to get a license at a small rural RMV states away from where he lived that did not check immigration status. He shared about how if he had not been able to get that license, he had planned to go back to Bolivia because he felt it was not possible to survive and thrive in this country without a driver's license. But he was able to get that license at that rural RMV, and so he stayed, and he could be there in our house on the day that we won licenses for all in Massachusetts. I try to get my head around how many changes take way more than 20 years, take 20 or 40 or 200 or 2,000. Take the work of generations on generations on generations. I try to get my head around preparing the ground, sowing those seeds for a harvest that we don't know if it will come. And we don't know if it will come in our lifetimes or our children's lifetimes or theirs. Assata Shakur, who has surely lived through so many generations of struggle for Black liberation, says, "I believe in sunshine, in windmills and waterfalls, tricycles and rocking chairs." She says, "I believe that seeds grow into sprouts and sprouts grow into trees. I believe in rain and tears and in life." Especially right now, in a time of backlash, when sowing seeds of justice can feel very far away, and it can feel like all of our energy is going towards survival, to making it through, to protecting those of us who are trans and queer and young and people of color and trying to access health care. Assata goes on to say, "If I know anything at all, it's that a wall is just a wall and nothing more. It can be broken down. I believe in living. I believe in birth. I believe in the sweat of love and the fire of truth, and that a lost ship steered by tired, seasick sailors can still be guided home to port." We won licenses by 53.7%. That means over 1 million votes for licenses. And also that means 46.3% of people in the state voted against licenses, also more than 1 million people. It could have so easily been lost as it had for so many years before. Many days, it does not feel like a harvest of justice and liberation for all people is possible. Many days, it feels like an act of faith in the impossible, that if we sow good seeds, we will reap a good harvest. But there is another truth, too, that I try to remember, that if we do not plant any seeds, we can be assured that there will be no harvest. If we do not build the raised beds, there will definitely be no tomatoes and no peppers this summer. If we do not start movements for justice and resistance out of our kitchens and community spaces and congregations, there will be no justice to reap. The seasons we know are changing. Rain and tornadoes, dry when it should be rainy, rainy when it should be dry, cold when there should be warm, and warm when it should be cold. And the weather, when it comes to justice, is also changing. Things maybe we never thought would happen, in good ways and in bad, are happening. We have some seeds at my house from my partner's grandmother that we keep meaning to plant. Quinoa, an herb that tastes a little bit like cilantro or mint, but there's really no equivalent that I've tasted in the US. I don't know if those seeds will grow. They're from a different hemisphere, a very different altitude, with totally different seasons. But we won't know unless we plant them. There will be no harvest unless we sow. And in some ways, all we have right now is the harvest of something we did not sow. Seeds smuggled from other lands, stewarded through generations of genocide, industrial agriculture, migration, changes in relationship to land. A harvest we may have no reason to believe in, but nourishes us each day anyways. We are one of many harvests. We know the injustices of our community cannot be undone with just one movement. We know the systems of domination require multiple cycles of movements that are working for many decades. The raised beds in our backyard/meadow/jungle/abandoned lot are ready for planting. I know the gardeners and farmers here have already started your seedlings, have already begun tending the ground. I see everyone in the Malden Gardeners group's beautiful plants that they're already giving away and putting in the ground. Our house is preparing for some big changes in our family, and I don't know if we'll have time or capacity to tend baby plants this spring and summer. My fear is that we won't have time to water or weed, and if we plant seeds, it may all be a waste of time and money. I think of all of the seedlings I stopped watering in the heat waves last summer and gave up on. But then I remember that if we don't plant anything, then for sure, nothing will grow. That to plant is an act of faith and hope and justice, and it's okay to not know if this will be a season of fertility or fallow. It's okay to try anyways. In her song, Sow Good Seeds, which I love, Mavis Staples sings, "Sow good seeds, you're gonna reap just what you sow." It's an impossible ask in an impossible time, but it's a statement of faith that if the seeds are good, then somehow so will be the harvest, whether it's now or in many generations. May we sow, may we reap, may we plant, even though we don't know what the harvest will bring, or one of many harvests.